Hello, good afternoon, everyone. To the lucky ones in Cape Town, obviously, and to the others too. I'm Simon Chamaillé-Jammes, and today I want to present the wehear logger, a bioacoustic logger we have developed with Laurent Latorre and Jonathan Miquel here in Montpellier, and that I'm using, for instance, with my PhD student Sara to study animal behavior and their responses to the environment. So, as most of you know, ecologists have become very good at tracking animals of all kinds. But even when we know where an animal is, it often remains difficult to know what the animal is actually doing and to what local factors it responds to. We are certainly getting better at understanding this, using, for instance, 3D accelerometers to infer behavior, or remote sense data to describe the habitat, for instance. But clearly there is room for complementary approaches, providing more direct information about what is happening. Behavioral ecologists have sometimes used animal-borne video loggers, such as, for instance, here on plains zebras. But as you see, it's not always easy to obtain correct footage. The field of view is generally small, and on top of this, these loggers have high power and memory consumption. And finally, the analysis of footage is labor-intensive and hard to automatize. Therefore, people have also considered using animal-borne audio loggers because many behaviors can be recognized by sound. The field of hearing of a microphone is generally larger than the field of view of a camera. These audio loggers have lower power and memory consumption than video loggers. And finally, and most importantly, probably, the spectrograms can be automatically analyzed much more easily than video footage. For anyone interested, there's a good review about animal-borne audio loggers by Greff and Yovel in 2019 Journal of Experimental Biology. So over the years, a number of teams have developed audio loggers to be deployed on the animals, but most have quite high power consumption and thus either provide a small amount of data or are very large because of the need to embark big battery packs. And this is critical because when we work with animals, we want to minimize the impact we have on them while still getting as much data as we can. And I also note that generally none of these loggers has become a go-to device. So that's why we started to develop the wehear logger, which would be an add-on to standard GPS collars that would record audible sounds from terrestrial animals, with large mammals in mind because of my personal interests. It would record with reasonable audio quality, but most importantly, it would have an ultra-low power consumption for obtaining the longest possible monitoring, obviously given battery size. And this is what we achieved. So in a nutshell, the wehear logger has an ultra-low power microcontroller, has a MEMS microphone, output audio as ADPCM compressed WAV file recorded at either 8 kHz or 32 kHz. I will come back to that later. It also records raw 3D acceleration data at 50 Hz, raw 3D magnetic field data at 10 Hz. That can, for instance, be useful for dead reckoning. It stores everything on an SD card. There's no wireless transmission because the data are too big, so the logger has to be recovered to access the data, and this is usually done by a drop-off on the GPS collar. There's a flexible scheduler for non-continuous monitoring also. So the logger is encased into a 3D printed casing, which is screwed on top of on a GPS collar. And the cost of producing the electronic board is between 60 and 100 euro per unit, depending on the production batch size. Naturally, because we use a MEMS microphone and ADPCM compression, we cannot get amazing audio quality, but something that is closer to okay, but sufficient quality. That's what we aimed at. The audio quality is also determined by the recording frequency, which is the main factor driving power consumption. So we have two versions of the loggers. The default one, which records at 8 kilohertz, and that we consider good enough for most studies, and the other version that records at 32 kilohertz and is available for studies requiring higher audio quality. So here is an example of what you get with the 8 kilohertz version of the logger if you put the logger in the landscape. Okay, I'm not too sure what the sound quality is in the rooms or at the other end on your computer. I just hope it sounded like it sounded on my computer, and this is what I mean by okay, sufficient quality in the context of the studies we're interested in. With our approach, we achieve ultra-low power consumption, which is certainly the great strength of the logger, as we do have a power consumption that is at least 5 times lower than alternative products and often more than 10 times better. For instance, with a 3.6 amps battery, as this one, you should get approximately 50 days of continuous audio data at 8 kilohertz, plus obviously also all the accelerometer and magnetometer data. We actually had a couple of loggers that collected with that battery 69 days of data. And obviously with the 32 kilohertz version, you would naturally get much less data, probably a bit less than 30 days. We did some work to see if we could reduce power consumption even more by integrating some artificial intelligence models in the logger itself and storing only classifications. I'm not going to go into the details, but the response is basically no, as even using very simple architectures that had not so great performance in terms of classification, we could only reduce slightly the power consumption of the logger, which would not compensate for the great loss of information compared to keeping all the raw data. The logger has now been deployed on more than 15 species throughout the world, in my project, but also on the project of many collaborators. Unfortunately, but as expecting for such kind of developments, we did have to face and sort out a number of software bugs in the first years, issues that have been resolved for the last 2 years. And to conclude the presentation, I will now show you a few examples of studies that have been conducted in Africa with the logger. So for instance, some colleagues from the University of Idaho have been using the logger on Greater Kudu in Mozambique to estimate how often they drink, using GPS data from the collar to direct the listening of the audio data. I have used the logger myself, obviously, on plain zebras. It has been suggested that in horses that snort, so this sound, might be an indicator of positive emotions. So I was curious to figure out when and where they are produced by zebras in the wild in a place where they have predators. And supporting the hypothesis, we found that snorts are produced when zebras are in safe and resourceful conditions, which is during the day and in open areas. Note here how you can barely ever hear a snort at night. Using the same data, we also created a deep learning model that could predict with high accuracy the chewing sound, this sound, made by zebras when they forage. And as a last example, lions. So we are studying the ecology using the logger data to reveal key events of their lives. For instance, we are interested in understanding hunting strategies of lions, and the loggers data are perfect to do this. Let me play a hunt. You don't hear anything? This is because it's the ambush. hear the prey screaming. The logger also allows detecting interaction with competitors, such as hyenas, for instance. So all of this is coming from loggers deployed on lions. Overall, the audio data appear to contain a lot of information, maybe more than you could think of, and we are currently using embeddings from deep learning models to understand what can be found in these thousands of hours of audio recordings. And finally, the audio data can be used as an ancillary data source to calibrate behavioral classification models based on accelerometry data. Although this is not perfect ground truth data, as you haven't observed the behavior directly, I hope that the previous examples have convinced you that for some behaviors, at least, the audio data can effectively be used as calibration or validation data for accelerometry-based classification models. I will stop here to allow good time for questions, and I thank you for your attention. And I thank the organizers of the conference, obviously. I apologize for not making it to Cape Town, and I look forward to interact with the community. Please don't hesitate to ask a question and contact me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Simon.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Do we have any questions in the audience? I actually have a question. Or no, we'll go with Catherine's online first. So
Sorry?
Says, I'm going to read Catherine's son's question online. She's I think I saw a picture of the wehear logger on a hyena, and your opening slide was of a lion. Was it the optimal placement on the collar you recommend to avoid damage, especially given the shorter lifetime on the logger compared to the GPS collar battery?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the question. Well, actually, surprisingly enough, we barely ever got damages on the logger itself. I think we've had more than 30 loggers deployed on lions now, and maybe more than 10 on hyenas, and I think we got only like 2 that came back broken. So where we are putting them up on the collar on the side seems to be a pretty good place, I would say.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions? So I just had a question. You said that the battery power was one of the selling points of the logger, and I forget how much the reduction in time was when you sampled at 32 kilohertz. Was that because of storage space, or does the higher sampling rate require more power?
No, it's actually what's using a lot of power is that it's actually copying onto the SD card. And because at 32 kilohertz, you've got much more data to store, that's why what is increasing the power consumption of the logger by pretty much twice.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks so much, Simon.
Thank you. Thank you for the organization. Great conference.